911, what's your emergency?
Trainer down. Orca has the trainer. We need help now. It was supposed to be a breathtaking spectacle, a demonstration of harmony between human and apex predator. But in the span of moments, everything changed. What began as another day at work became a tragedy that would forever alter the landscape of marine entertainment. This is the story of Sophia Reynolds, a dedicated orca trainer whose life and death would raise profound questions about our relationship with the ocean's most intelligent predators. Before we begin, make sure to like this video, subscribe to the channel, and share this story so we can continue bringing you powerful documentaries like this one. Let's begin. Sophia Reynolds wasn't born into marine biology. She was raised in rural Montana, hundreds of miles from the nearest ocean. While other children in her landlocked hometown dreamed of horses and mountains, Sophia was mesmerized by documentaries about the sea. Her bedroom walls weren't covered with posters of musicians or actors, but with images of dolphins, whales, and especially orcas, the striking black and white hunters that captured her imagination more than any other creature. Her fascination began at age 8, when her father, a high school science teacher, took her to visit relatives in Seattle. They attended a marine show, and Sophia sat transfixed as trainers worked with orcas in perfect synchronicity. That night, she told her parents, "That's what I'm going to do someday." They smiled indulgently, expecting her passion to fade like most childhood dreams. It never did. She was always different that way, recalled her father, James Reynolds. When Sophia became interested in something, it wasn't just a passing phase. She would immerse herself completely. Even as a child, she had this remarkable focus. By 16, against considerable parental concern, Sophia convinced her parents to let her spend summers volunteering at rehabilitation centers for injured seals and sea lions in Oregon. Her final summer coincided with the arrival of an orphaned orca calf, an extremely rare and challenging case. Though she lacked formal qualifications, Sophia's dedication earned her a place on the round-the-clock monitoring team. When the calf began accepting hand-fed fish after a week of refusal, a critical turning point in her recovery, Sophia was the one holding the feeding pole. That experience changed her, noted Dr. Lydia Martinez, who supervised the rehab center. It wasn't about career ambition anymore. It was about connection, about responsibility to these sentient beings. She understood, in a visceral way, both their extraordinary intelligence and their vulnerability. After high school, she pursued marine biology at Pacific Coast University, one of the country's leading programs for cetacean studies. Her undergraduate thesis examined vocalization patterns in captive versus wild orcas, comparing recordings from marine parks with those collected during research expeditions. The work was published in a respected journal, unusual for an undergraduate, and caught the attention of researchers in the field. Sophia had this presence, remembered Dr. Thomas Whitman, her university advisor. Animals responded to her differently. It wasn't just training technique, it was something in her energy, her patience, her ability to observe and adapt in the moment. Many students come through with technical knowledge, but that intuitive connection can't be taught. It was during her second year of graduate studies that recruiters from Pacifica Marine Adventure Park attended a conference where Sophia was presenting her research on behavioral enrichment for captive marine mammals. Impressed by her knowledge and practical approach to animal welfare within captivity settings, they approached her about joining their training program after graduation. The offer from Pacifica was substantial, not just financially, but in terms of the responsibilities they were willing to entrust to her. Most new trainers spent years working with smaller marine mammals before being considered for orca training. Pacifica was offering an accelerated path based on her academic background and demonstrated aptitude. Her graduate thesis advisor was disappointed, having hoped she would pursue a PhD. But Sophia explained her decision in terms that would later seem prophetic. These animals are already in captivity. They can't simply be returned to the wild. They need advocates within the system, people who understand their needs beyond their value as entertainment. I can do more good there than writing papers that industry leaders may never read. Before she'd even completed her master's degree, Sophia moved to California and began working at Pacifica. Within 3 years, she had earned a place on the elite orca training team. By 30, she had become the lead trainer for Titan, Pacifica's largest male orca and the centerpiece of their premier show, Oceans Unleashed. It was an extraordinary ascent in a field where seniority typically dictated advancement. Visitors to the park remembered Sophia's radiant smile, her graceful movements in the water, and the way she spoke about the animals in her care, not as performers, but as partners. Behind the scenes, she maintained meticulous records of each animal's behavior and advocated tirelessly for enrichment programs, larger habitats, and reduced performance schedules. She was the bridge, said former colleague Markuschen. She understood both worlds, what the park needed as a business and what the animals needed as living beings. She could translate between those needs better than anyone I've known. Sophia's personal journals, shared by her family after her death, reveal a woman continuously wrestling with ethical questions. I know this isn't ideal, she wrote 2 years before the incident. I know these animals deserve more. But I also know that without advocates inside the system, change will come more slowly, if at all. Every improvement matters. But the world of marine entertainment harbors complexities that no amount of training, no degree of dedication, can fully resolve. Behind the choreographed performances and carefully managed public image lies a reality few visitors ever glimpse. Pacifica Marine Adventure Park sprawls across 80 acres of prime coastal property. Its gleaming structures and immaculate walkways welcome millions of tourists annually. The park's main attraction, the Ocean Theater, holds 5,000 spectators for thrice-daily performances featuring Pacifica's collection of orcas, known in marketing materials as the Titans of the Deep. The park opened its doors in 1989, during the boom years of marine entertainment. Over decades, the shows evolved from simple demonstrations into elaborate productions with music, narrative, special effects, and increasingly complex interactions between trainers and animals. What visitors didn't see were the hours of training, the frustrations, the risks, and the sometimes contentious debates about welfare standards. As scientific understanding of cetacean cognition advanced, tensions intensified within the industry. Studies published throughout the 2000s demonstrated orcas' sophisticated communication systems, their emotional processing capabilities, their cultural transmission of knowledge within pods. Evidence mounted that these weren't simply trainable performers but sentient beings with cognitive capabilities in some ways comparable to humans. Pacifica responded to changing winds with incremental reforms. They expanded pool systems, enhanced environmental enrichment, modified show content to emphasize education rather than pure spectacle. These changes were significant compared to earlier industry practices, but critics maintained they were insufficient against the fundamental reality. No constructed environment could adequately replicate the natural habitat of animals evolved to travel up to 100 miles daily through open ocean in complex social units. It was into this evolving landscape that Titan arrived. Captured near the Norwegian coast at approximately 3 years old, he had grown into a magnificent specimen, 22 feet long, weighing nearly 12,000 pounds, with a striking 6-foot dorsal fin that stood perfectly straight when he breached. Estimated to be 27 years old, he had spent 24 years in captivity. His power in the water was breathtaking, his intelligence unmistakable. The circumstances of Titan's capture were typical of the era, a controversial but legal operation in which a pod of orcas was corralled into a narrow fjord using boats and underwater noise deterrents. Young whales were separated from their mothers and hoisted from the water in slings. According to records later obtained by marine welfare organizations, 3 orcas died during the operation that yielded Titan and 4 other juveniles, all destined for marine parks around the world. Trainers described Titan as methodical, precise, and unusually focused. Unlike some of the park's other orcas, he rarely engaged in playful behavior outside of sessions. He performed with mechanical consistency, earning him the nickname the Clockwork Killer Whale among staff. Sophia called him the professor for his analytical approach to new tasks. But internal records told another story beneath the surface. Over his years at Pacifica, Titan had been involved in several concerning episodes, moments of defiance, aggression toward younger males, refusal to return to holding pools after performances. 3 times, he had demonstrated what trainers termed boundary testing with humans, not attacking, but ignoring commands in ways that left trainers vulnerable in the water. Dr. Elena Vasquez, a cetacean behavior specialist who consulted for several marine parks, had expressed concerns about Titan's psychological state as early as 2019. Male orcas in their prime reproductive years require specific social and environmental conditions that simply cannot be replicated in captivity, she wrote in a confidential assessment. The resulting frustration can manifest in unpredictable ways. Her recommendations for reduced performance schedules, expanded habitats, and elimination of certain high-intensity behaviors were partially implemented, then gradually abandoned as they conflicted with show requirements and visitor expectations. In the wild, orcas travel in family groups called pods, developing distinct cultural traditions, hunting strategies, and even dialects in their vocalizations. In captivity, these natural behaviors are impossible to maintain. Social groupings are determined by facility needs. Movement is constrained to pools that represent a tiny fraction of their natural range. Diet consists not of live prey requiring complex coordination to hunt, but dead fish provided on schedule. Under these conditions, orcas have been documented developing stereotypic behaviors, repetitive patterns like circular swimming or obsessive object play that suggest psychological distress. Some grind their teeth against concrete walls, wearing them down to the pulp. Others display aggression toward tankmates or self-harming behaviors. Sophia understood these realities better than most. She advocated within the constraints of the park system, implementing enrichment protocols and pushing for habitat improvements. She believed that while the current situation was far from ideal, her presence benefited the animals in her care. In the weeks before the incident, subtle changes appeared in Titan's behavior. Night Watch staff noted he was spending more time floating motionless at the surface, a behavior called logging that can indicate stress or boredom. During training sessions, he showed delayed response times to familiar cues. Twice, he ignored recall signals, remaining at the far end of the pool until trainers modified the reward system. These changes coincided with several operational adjustments at Pacifica. The spring tourism season was approaching, and management had increased the show schedule from 2 daily performances to 3. A construction project on an adjacent pool had introduced unfamiliar noise and vibration. 2 younger orcas had been temporarily relocated to Titan's pool while their habitat underwent maintenance. Sophia documented these concerns in detailed daily reports. She requested a reduction in Titan's performance schedule and suggested temporary suspension of certain high-energy behaviors. Management was reluctant to make significant changes to their star attraction during peak season. One exchange, dated just 2 weeks before the incident, captured the fundamental disconnect. Sophia had written a detailed assessment of Titan's increasing stress indicators, concluding, "While I understand the business imperatives, I believe we're approaching a situation where continuing the current schedule presents unnecessary risk to both animal welfare and trainer safety." The response from the entertainment director was polite but firm. "We've implemented several of your suggested modifications and will continue monitoring closely. However, complete removal from rotation during spring break would create insurmountable scheduling challenges." 3 days before the incident, Sophia met with Dr. Laura Winters, the park's head veterinarian. Security footage shows them in animated conversation beside Titan's night pool. According to later testimony, Sophia had detected subtle changes in Titan's eye movement patterns and skin coloration that might indicate developing health issues. Blood samples were taken the following day, but results were still pending on the morning of March 12th. Dr. Winters had recommended postponing performances until the analysis was complete. But with inconclusive clinical evidence and thousands of tickets pre-sold for the holiday weekend, management determined the shows would proceed with enhanced monitoring protocols. On the morning of the incident, Sophia arrived at the park before dawn, as was her custom. She reviewed behavior logs from the night shift, prepared Titan's vitamin supplements, and met with her assistant trainers to plan the day's sessions. The first show was scheduled for 11 a.m., an hour earlier than usual to accommodate spring break crowds. According to colleague interviews, Sophia expressed mild concern about Titan's energy level but felt the show could proceed with minor modifications. She eliminated one inverted breach sequence and adjusted the finale to reduce physical demands. Security camera footage shows her at the underwater viewing window at 9:45 a.m., watching Titan with the focused attention that characterized her approach. The preliminary training session at 10 a.m. proceeded without incident. Titan responded appropriately to basic cues, accepted his pre-show diet, and showed no overt signs of agitation. The younger female orcas, Luna and Nova, were particularly energetic, which trainers later suggested might have influenced Titan's state leading into the performance. The Ocean Theater filled quickly that morning. Spring break visitors lined up 30 minutes before showtime, eager for front-row seats. By 10:50 a.m., nearly 4,000 spectators had settled into the stadium seating, children clutching stuffed orcas from the gift shop, parents readying cameras. The show began precisely at 11 a.m. with the signature musical fanfare and lighting sequence. The initial segments proceeded flawlessly. The younger orcas performed synchronized breaches, the female orcas demonstrated fluke waves and spy hops, trainers narrated educational content about orca physiology and intelligence. At 11:27 a.m., Titan made his entrance. As the largest and most impressive animal in Pacifica's collection, his appearance always drew gasps from the audience. He circled the main pool once, then executed a powerful breach that soaked the first 15 rows, delighting shrieking children and creating the perfect photo opportunity for parents. The next 10 minutes unfolded according to the established routine. From the surface, everything appeared normal. But other trainers would later report noticing subtle irregularities in his swim patterns, slightly delayed responses to secondary signals. At 11:42 a.m., the show reached what staff called the connection moment, a quiet segment designed to demonstrate the bond between human and orca. The lights dimmed, the music softened, and Sophia knelt at the edge of the pool platform. Titan approached and placed his rostrum, the front of his head, gently in her outstretched hands. It was a moment of apparent tenderness that reliably moved audiences to whispers of awe. What happened next occurred so quickly that many spectators initially thought it was part of the performance. As Sophia rose from her kneeling position and stepped back to signal the transition to the next sequence, Titan lurched forward rather than backing away as trained. His massive head cleared the platform edge, jaws opening. In a movement almost too fast for the human eye to track, he seized Sophia's left leg and pulled her into the water. The audience reaction transformed from expectant silence to confused murmurs, then to horrified realization. Children pointed, adults gasped, someone screamed. The assistant trainer at the secondary platform immediately activated the emergency signal, a specific underwater tone designed to direct orcas to the opposite end of the pool. Titan ignored it. With Sophia in his grasp, he dove to the bottom of the 40-foot main pool. Security footage shows other staff members rushing to emergency stations. The show narrator's voice came over the speakers, steady despite the crisis. Ladies and gentlemen, we're experiencing a show interruption. Please remain calm and seated while our staff addresses this situation. But the situation was rapidly deteriorating beyond management. When Titan surfaced briefly, Sophia was still in his jaws, now limp. He circled the perimeter of the pool at high speed, underwater for 30-second stretches, surfacing just long enough for his blowhole to clear before diving again. Emily Takahashi, who had brought her 7-year-old daughter to see the show, later described the surreal shift in atmosphere. One moment everyone was smiling, taking photos, enjoying this beautiful connection between the trainer and the whale. The next moment there was this collective gasp, this realization that something terrible was happening. The emergency response team attempted to deploy the movable gates that could seal off portions of the pool system, hoping to isolate Titan in a smaller area where they might have more control. He evaded these efforts with apparent deliberation, changing direction unpredictably. At the 4-minute mark, the park's head veterinarian authorized deployment of the emergency net system, heavy-duty meshes designed to be lowered into the pool to restrict an animal's movement in crisis situations. 3 separate nets were deployed, but Titan navigated between and beneath them. Visitors were being evacuated from the stadium now, herded by security personnel toward the exits. Many were in tears. Parents covered children's eyes. Some filmed with their phones despite staff pleas to stop. At 11:51 a.m., 9 minutes after the initial grab, Titan finally released Sophia near the medical pool gate. Staff were able to retrieve her unresponsive body while the emergency veterinary team used acoustic signals and food reinforcement to direct Titan into an isolation pool. Paramedics began CPR immediately. Despite their efforts, and those of the emergency room team at Coastal Memorial Hospital, where she was transported by helicopter, Sophia Reynolds was pronounced dead at 12:37 p.m. The official cause of death was drowning compounded by traumatic injuries to the lower extremities and abdomen. In the immediate aftermath, Pacifica Marine Adventure Park issued a terse statement. We are profoundly saddened by the tragic accident that occurred during this morning's performance. We have lost a beloved member of our Pacifica family. All shows are suspended while we cooperate with investigating authorities. Our thoughts are with the trainer's family during this devastating time. The park closed for 3 days. When it reopened, the orca habitat remained shuttered indefinitely for renovation. Visitors left flowers and notes at an impromptu memorial near the main entrance. Behind closed doors, multiple investigations began simultaneously. The Occupational Safety and Health Administration, OSHA, dispatched a team to assess workplace safety violations. Local law enforcement conducted interviews to determine if criminal negligence charges were warranted. Marine mammal experts from 3 universities were consulted as independent evaluators. Titan's medical records showed no physical abnormalities that might explain the sudden aggression. His behavior logs, however, revealed the pattern of increasing deviations from established norms, subtle changes that, viewed individually, hadn't triggered major interventions, but collectively suggested growing instability. Most concerning were emails discovered between mid-level management personnel discussing Sophia's request for reduced performance schedules. One message, dated just 2 weeks before the incident, read, pushing again for reduced show load for T, creative solutions needed to maintain visitor experience while addressing concerns. The proposed solutions focused on modifying reinforcement schedules rather than addressing the underlying recommendation. 9 days after the incident, the preliminary OSHA report identified multiple serious violations of workplace safety standards. The most damning finding concerned the internal communications. Management was aware of escalating risk factors identified by qualified personnel and failed to implement appropriate mitigating measures. The media coverage was relentless. News channels ran special reports with titles like Predators and Pools and The Dark Side of Marine Entertainment. Former trainers came forward with their own concerns and experiences. Social media erupted with hashtags, #JusticeForSophia, #EmptyTheTanks, #FreeTitan. Dr. Margaret Okafor, a renowned marine mammal scientist who had long criticized captivity programs, appeared on multiple news programs. This tragedy was not unpredictable, she stated firmly. It was inevitable. We have created artificial environments for creatures whose evolutionary adaptations occurred over millions of years in the open ocean. We've separated them from their family structures, confined their movement, and expected them to perform unnatural behaviors for our entertainment. The incident also sparked renewed interest in previous orca-related fatalities and injuries in marine parks worldwide. Comparisons were drawn to the death of trainer Don Brancho at SeaWorld in 2010, killed by an orca named Tilikum who had been involved in 2 previous human deaths. Sophia's parents maintained a dignified silence throughout the media storm, requesting privacy during their mourning. A month after her death, they released a single statement. Our daughter dedicated her life to understanding marine mammals and educating others about their intelligence, their social nature, and their rightful place in our world's oceans. She recognized the complexities and contradictions of her chosen field. She believed in evolution rather than revolution, in making incremental improvements rather than abandoning the animals already in human care. We ask that her death not be used as a weapon by any side of this debate, but rather as a spark for thoughtful reconsideration of our relationship with the natural world and its inhabitants. For Titan, the aftermath brought significant changes. After 3 months in isolation, he was transferred to Pacifica's newly established retirement habitat, a sectioned-off cove offering more space and natural stimuli than traditional concrete pools. The park announced he would never perform again, instead serving as the subject of observational research aimed at better understanding orca psychology. Animal welfare experts remain skeptical. It's certainly better than a show tank, commented Dr. Vasquez, who had warned about Titan's psychological state years earlier. But it's still containment. It's still a life fundamentally different from what evolution designed him for. The park industry as a whole felt the ripple effects. Insurance costs for facilities housing orcas skyrocketed. Several smaller parks announced plans to phase out their orca programs entirely. Even large corporations with multiple marine parks began shifting their business models, emphasizing virtual experiences, conservation messaging, and rescue work over performances. 15 months after the incident, legislative impact began materializing. California passed the Marine Mammal Protection and Handler Safety Act, prohibiting theatrical performances with orcas and requiring minimum habitat standards significantly larger than industry norms. At the federal level, congressional committees held hearings on marine mammal captivity standards. 6 months after Sophia's death, a group of her colleagues established the Sophia Reynolds Marine Mammal Welfare Foundation. Its mission, to fund research into captive marine mammal psychology, train care staff in modern welfare techniques, and eventually establish a network of seaside sanctuaries for cetaceans retired from entertainment. She would have approved, said Marcus Chin, who left Pacifica to help establish the foundation. It's not about casting blame or making enemies. It's about recognizing that our understanding has evolved, and our practices need to evolve with it. The Foundation's first major initiative was a comprehensive study of stereotypic behaviors in captive orcas, correlating them with habitat size, social groupings, and enrichment protocols. Its findings helped establish new minimum standards for facilities still housing these animals. 3 years after Sophia's death, A documentary film titled The Sophia Protocol premiered at the Sundance Film Festival. Rather than focusing exclusively on the tragedy, it examined her methodical efforts to improve welfare standards from within the system. It featured interviews with those who had worked alongside her, as well as footage from her graduate research and educational outreach programs. She wasn't perfect, and she would have been the first to admit that, said the filmmaker in a post-screening interview. She existed in the gray area where most meaningful work happens. She compromised daily, balancing what was ideal against what was possible. But she never stopped pushing that line forward. Among the most significant outcomes was the establishment of North America's first true seaside sanctuary for retired captive orcas, a cordoned-off bay providing vastly more space than traditional concrete pools with natural tides. Living ecosystems and minimal human intervention. Named Sophia's Cove, it opened 5 years after her death. For Titan, however, these changes came too late. 2 years after being moved to Pacifica's modified retirement habitat, he developed a respiratory infection common among captive marine mammals. Despite intensive veterinary intervention, his condition deteriorated. He died at an estimated age of 29, younger than wild male orcas typically live. A necropsy revealed multiple chronic health issues beyond the respiratory infection, dental problems from years of chewing on concrete, liver abnormalities consistent with long-term stress, arthritic changes in his flukes and pectoral fins. His body told the story his behaviors had long suggested, a life of constraint, of chronic discomfort, of adaptations forced upon an animal evolutionarily designed for constant movement across vast oceanic territories. Dr. Elena Vasquez, who had warned about Titan's psychological state years before the incident, offered perhaps the most nuanced assessment. His story illustrates the complexity of these situations. He was captured as a juvenile, spent decades in a profoundly unnatural environment, and ultimately caused a human death that led to his own isolation. There's no simple villain in that narrative. It's a tragedy with multiple dimensions, a tragedy that began the moment he was separated from his pod. On the anniversary of Sophia's death each year, former colleagues gather at sunset on the beach near Pacifica Marine Adventure Park. They share memories, professional accomplishments, and the small victories in marine mammal welfare that have accumulated since her passing. They release biodegradable lanterns that float briefly on the ocean surface before dissolving, temporary lights on an endless sea. The fifth such gathering held particular significance. It coincided with the announcement that Pacifica would be transitioning entirely away from live animal exhibitions over a 10-year period. The park would gradually relocate its remaining marine mammals to sanctuaries or improved facilities, repurposing its infrastructure for conservation education, virtual experiences, and wild population research support. It feels like completion of a circle, reflected Michael Delgado, who had witnessed the tragedy firsthand. This is essentially what Sophia had proposed years ago, a transition plan that acknowledged business realities while prioritizing animal welfare. She was advocating for this evolution before the crisis made it necessary. Sophia Reynolds lived 34 years. She spent more than half her life studying, working with, and advocating for marine mammals. Her death, like her life, exists in a space of contradiction, a tragedy born from the very connection she worked to establish, a loss that catalyzed changes she had long sought. In the broader cultural conversation about captivity, about human-animal relationships, about the ethics of entertainment, her story reveals the inadequacy of simple narratives. There are no perfect villains here, no flawless heroes, only complex beings, human and cetacean, navigating systems not designed to accommodate their full complexity. What remains clear is this: in the vast, mysterious relationship between humans and the natural world, there is still so much we do not understand. Sophia Reynolds dedicated her life to expanding that understanding. In her absence, the responsibility falls to all of us, not just to ask whether captive marine mammals should perform for our entertainment, but to question our fundamental assumptions about our right to contain, control, and commodify the wild. If her story has moved you, if it has prompted reflection or reconsideration, allow that to be a beginning. Support ethical marine research. Educate yourself about cetacean intelligence and social structures. Consider the true cost of your entertainment choices. Speak for those who cannot speak for themselves. Because beneath the surface of every simple narrative about animals and humans, there lies a deeper story, one about respect, about boundaries, about the humility required to coexist with creatures whose minds and experiences remain, in many ways, unknowable to us. In Sophia's own words, from a presentation she gave 6 months before her death, these magnificent animals have existed for millions of years in environments we can barely comprehend, developing intelligence and social structures we're still struggling to understand. Our relationship with them reflects not just how we treat other species, but how we understand our place in the natural world. Are we controllers, spectators, students, or partners? The answer shapes not just their future, but our own. Thank you for watching. If you found this story meaningful, please like the video, subscribe to our channel, and share it with someone who needs to hear it. Your support helps us continue telling the stories that matter, the ones too important to forget.